Welcome to Los Compas Lounge, a PSA for brown men.
We are your hosts. This is Raul.
This is Javier.
My name is Reuven, and this is a podcast about brown men talking about issues that matter to you. We talk about things that we don't usually talk about in the brown communities. We're just three regular compas sharing our experiences to inspire positive change. Compa, pull up a seat. We have one ready for you. Who's to say and who has the right, who has the final say that says a true Chicano, a true Latino, a true Mexicano is only someone that could speak Spanish, and I don't think that's right, man. I mean, who makes up these rules, and should we follow them? Personally, I don't think language is a prerequisite for being Latino, being Chicano, being a brown man. What do you guys think?
Well, that's a good topic to jump into because it's so true. It's like the level of your command of the Spanish language. This should not dictate whether or not you're brown, right? So that big question is: does speaking Spanish make you any more brown than the next person?
So I grew up speaking Spanish. That was my first language, and then, but the other thing is also like with my father, I mean, I'm not saying that he's right or, but it's just the way that it was that he's like kind of, he was one of those people that would hate it when a dark person or didn't speak Spanish, and he's like, "Ahí se le ve el nopal en la frente y ni siquiera sabe hablar español." Like it would irk him. Like one time we went to the beach, and then after that there was this like these cholos, this cholo man talking all in English and everything like that. My dad's all like, "Oh, like talking smack about him just because he was talking in English." Like that was kind of weird like that. Ni siquiera ahí se ve claramente mexicano y ni siquiera sabe español, and like, or like, I don't know why it would bother him or whatever, And then the man, just to let my dad know that he didn't know Spanish, he's like, "Oh, voy a ir a la tienda, no se le ofrece nada," or something like that. Like the guy told him like in a not even confrontational,
but sort of put him in check in a nice
yeah,
way.
exactly. Yeah. And so all my dad says like, "No, ni te conozco, ¿cómo te voy a dar dinero?" And so like that. But then it kind of like it silenced my dad now, like he did, But it was like that was my experience, and I mean, I'm not like, even when we're at the table, like my dad, he didn't like me talking to my siblings in English. He's like, en español. Like he always like made us talk in Spanish, like everything. So that was my experience. I mean, like I said, that's not how I feel. I mean, it's like because as I started speaking more English, my Spanish started I started saying things wrong and stuff like that, so even like when I went to Mexico and I saw like some of my cousins, and then they were like, I'll say like a word like in Spanish, or I'd say it wrong, and then they'd make fun of me, like, "Oh, así no se dice pendejo." I go, "¿Sabes qué, güey?" I go, "Mi español es mejor que tu inglés, así es que cállate," but yeah, so
But you're trying to one up each other on who's the better Spanish speaker. That's kind of powerful. That's what this episode's about. It's like, why do we power trip over that stuff?
Yeah, man. That is a really good question. What is this about power tripping, or authenticating, and why? Why is language such a important part of who we are? Like my upbringing is a little bit different. My mother is Mexicana. She was born in Mexico. My father is Chicano. He was born in Texas, but all our families are from different parts of Mexico. And I was born on the border town, on a border town. So we spoke Spanish. We can all speak English, but we spoke Spanish. That was just our norm, especially right there, living literally on La Frontera, just 5 miles away from the fence, Um, and I remember I was like a hardcore, as a little chavalito, man. I was a hardcore, nationalist, dude, like little 4-year-old, 5-year-old, like totally proud of being brown and everything, and only wanting to speak Spanish, man, and because in my mind, English was such an ugly language, such a detached language, there was no cariño, no love in there, and it wasn't until I went to first grade and the Americanization process began. I didn't know it at that time, but that's basically what it is, the Americanization process of denying us the our our right to speak Spanish, and over time, my Spanish language skills, like with Javi, deteriorated, and it got to a point where we would only speak Spanish at home, and a lot of other things that happened around, just growing up on a border town, that really made the Spanish language, deteriorate for me, and it was tough moving to LA, being basically Americanized now, being forced to be American and being forced to let go of my Mexican roots, which was speaking Spanish and everything else that comes along with being Mexicano, and having to be reintroduced to the language, the Spanish language, moving to Islos, and the same thing that Javi went through, I went through. It's like, well, este pocho, no sabe hablar de español, y no habla español, y nomás habla en inglés, es un güero, and all this and this and that, and that hurt, man. That fucking hurt, and it was a trip because part of me didn't want to speak Spanish because I saw what my mom and my parents went through, and I saw what my older brother went through, and I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to feel that pain. So I said, nah, Charlie with that. But another part of me was like, no, but that's who I am. And I want to speak Spanish. I need to speak Spanish. So it's like this, there's this conflict within me, man, and I'm pretty sure this experience and these emotions aren't genuine to me, aren't unique to me. I'm pretty sure a lot of people go through it, because we're trying to fit in where no one wants us to fit in, sort of like here in the U.S., I'm not white enough, American enough to be American, and then when I go to Mexico, I'm not Mexican enough to be Mexicano. So where the hell does that leave me? And that leaves me in this place that I call Atzlan, being Chicano, and even that, there's, there's a lot of ridges in there.
Yeah, and that should be one of our punchlines. The punchline is you do define for yourself who you are and what that means, right? Mm-hmm. But before we start talking about that, for me, my experience is very similar to both of you, where I grew up speaking Spanish, man. I thought Spanish and being brown was just regular part of life growing up, And then not until you go in LA, in the inner city, in East LA, you start looking at your friends and the cool kids. And I probably shared this with you guys, but at that moment, I began to identify right away. Shit, I don't want to be the mojado speaking Spanish. I want to be part of the cool kids who speak proper English, right? And even then, our proper English for all the Chicanitos there in East LA was broken up, Spanish with English and pochocized, right? So I wanted to be those guys. I didn't want to be, these kids who had these Aztec names, Cuauhtemoc, or I didn't want to be some guy Candelario or some guy. It was sad, man. Here's really quick. And sorry, Candelario, if you're still out there, but he was really dark. He looked very indigenous, and we used to call him Chocolate, and that was our thing. Like the more we're able to distance ourselves from a Spanish-speaking Oaxaqueño, the better it was for us, because we surely didn't want to be the target of any bullying, and especially if he spoke Spanish. So I grew up kind of like you're talking about this, Ruben, totally conflicted, right? And then it's not until you get into college where you start kind of realizing, like, shit, Spanish is part of your heritage, part of the Spanish side of who you are. There's no denying that. And I think comedy compadres, if you guys don't remember the early 90s, they had this skit, right? And it always started off like, are you brown? And then are you was it are you confused and full of rage?
Oh yeah, culture class.
Culture
yeah.
clash.
Yeah,
There you
culture
go.
clash.
I'm
Yeah.
confused and full of
Full of
rage.
right?
Yeah.
And that really spoke to a lot
Yeah.
of us back
Oh,
then,
yeah,
right?
man.
Because it's
Definitely.
so true. You're speaking English and Spanish, and you're looking like a big, Latino or Mexicanote, whatever you are. You have that look, and then when just the experience with your dad, Javi's like, "Este
Yeah.
vato looks all moreno, choloed out," and your dad makes these assumptions, right? He's like,
Yeah.
"Man, how sad it is that this guy doesn't
Like,
speak
like a
Spanish."
pocho. That was
Yeah,
este
and then the
pocho.
dude comes,
Yeah.
he throws a curveball at your dad. He, throws him off, and he's like, "Hey, se le ofrece algo, voy a la tienda." And your dad's like, "Oh, shit."
Yeah.
but that's the part that's trippy, because I used to play both sides of that, right? I played the part of hating on people because they look like me or they're darker than me, and they have they're unable to articulate any kind of Spanish, right? And then I was on the other side when I was younger, where it's like, shit, please don't look at me. I'm going to pretend I don't know Spanish because I want to fit in. And it's that kind of power thing, that dynamic
Be
of,
like the cool kids.
yeah, the cool
Mhm.
kids. So all of that made me think about culture clash, and that's what it is. It's this conflict that we're constantly in, trying to navigate. And at the end of the day, does it really freaking matter?
No, I know it's like I was not quite Candelario because, or I guess sort of maybe. I was like in my class, like, I mean, we were all Mexicans. I mean, of Mexican descendants, like the last names and everything like that. But they like, I don't know. I used to go to Mexico a lot, like during Christmas. So I would take like an extra week or something. So like they would, like some of the cool kids, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
like they would like kind of like little bit make fun of me or something, or like whenever they said we'd be reading history books and they talk about like Mexico, like the marketplaces or thing, people who look at me like for validation. I go, yeah, it's true, you know.
You're the
You know, like,
token Mexican, huh?
yeah, exactly. I was a token Mexican, but in reality, we were all
I
Mexicans,
know,
you
that's
know.
what's funny about it.
Yeah. But that's what I was the one that was actually like more in touch with like real Mexico. And then after that, when they show pictures, like all of them wearing like white shirts, like if people dress normal, you know, like it's just not that when you go to Mexico, everybody like in the pictures, like the way that they show them, like,
Campesino kind
Yeah.
of
yeah,
Wear like
the attire.
the traditional, quote unquote, traditional wears. Yeah.
So does it matter, Ruben?
Yes and no. Um, One, it matters to you if it matters to you, just as an individual. Uh, and yes, from an economic perspective, I think it definitely matters because being bilingual or multilingual opens up the doors for you in the job space, in the workforce, as well as just as in life. Because if you're able to communicate in multiple languages, that means your sphere of influence and the people that you can come in contact with expands and grows, man. I mean, the Spanish language is spoken throughout one entire hemisphere and in a number of countries in Europe, and if you go to Europe, you know how to speak Spanish, they can understand you. And it's actually preferred that you speak Spanish as opposed to English because they don't like Americans over there. So, you go over there and say, soy mexicano. Oh, okay. And it's cool. So, yes, in that aspect, the global aspect, but bringing it back down here to the U.S. and to California, I think it can also be a detriment within our own communities, everything that we're talking about right now. And I think our experiences, once again, they're not unique, but we're all um, we're all sons of immigrants, and with Javi, you're an immigrant yourself, so I think, if you would ask someone who's like a third, fourth, or fifth generation, we'd probably get a different answer, because I think when you're in third, fourth, or fifth generation or further, you're that much more removed from the Mexican experience, or whatever country you're from, or your parents or grandparents are from, and you're that much more removed from an immigrant experience, and going through what immigrants go through, just in general, not just Latino immigrants, but just immigrants in general, what we go through, and it's a lot more unique. And for me, yes and no,
Yeah, and
it is a very
right now
important
that you
part
made
of
me
our
think about
lives, and
this
part of our
idea of
experiences.
it shouldn't matter, right? But it is part of our experience, whether how far we are removed from the immigrant generation experience. And part of me thinks about how sad it is sometimes that we always struggle as a group, Latinos, Latino X, whatever you want to call it, or just brown folks in general. We struggle to unite, and I think this is one of those issues where we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, because we get hung up on this idea of, if you don't speak Spanish, somehow you're not brown enough. So then we kind of contribute to this division amongst ourselves, and we further divide ourselves because we're proud, and we're brown, right? Brown and proud, but don't hate me because I don't speak Spanish. We're so proud in one regard, but on the other regard, we're like, well, I don't want to be part of this bigger group if all I know is be American, or all I know is hate from the first generationers. Like, they hate me because I don't speak Spanish, and that kind of sucks to me. I think about that because my kids, and it makes me think about that, and we could jump into that later. But this whole idea of how we do this to ourselves, and it contributes to the divisions that we already experience. And now, a brown and proud PSA. You have the power to choose the kind of person you want to be. Don't let language be a barrier for building positive relationships. And remember, you don't have to speak Spanish to be down with the brown. We'd be honored to have you as a compa. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite listening app.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the romanticizing of a land that maybe we were a part of, and for me, I was never a part of, because I was born here in the U.S. But like I said, I mean, I just had to literally look southeast, and there's Mexico. And I think another part is like all three of us have talked about, is uh, a different aspect of social distancing. We don't want to be connected to the images of Latinos and how they're portrayed in the larger society. It's like, no, you know what? I don't only work as a dishwasher, or I don't only work out in the fields. I'm a computer programmer, or I'm a librarian, or I'm a businessman. And one question that always sticks to me is, why is it that the Latino community specifically, why is it that we're the only ones that have to speak our quote unquote native language? When you see like Italian Americans, why isn't that they have to speak Italian, or German Americans, or Irish Americans? Oh, I'm a proud Irishman. Oh, well, speak to me in Gaelic. Oh, I don't know that. Well, why do you expect me to speak Spanish?
Yeah, but that would be interesting, though, because what if there is a small subgroup of Irish Americans and recent Irish
They look
immigrants?
down at,
Yeah,
and they look down at the ones that can't speak.
yeah, I think that may be true to a certain extent. Like, at some point, the Irish were looked as a
Oh yeah.
really negative, back in the
Oh yeah,
the
yeah, definitely,
1800s.
man.
They
Yeah.
were the Mexicans, right? Of instead of in the
The
Southwest, it
Italians.
was the East Coast, right? So I think there was some of that, but for us, it's a constant reinforcement because we're so close to
So
the border.
maybe eventually, like like now, like what Ruben is saying, that when you meet an Irish American, you don't expect them to speak their native language or Italian or
Yeah,
um, and so maybe eventually that'll happen with us, with the of Mexican or Spanish speaking descendants. Maybe they're just gonna, oh, they're American. I mean, like you said, that was like 100 years ago when they were, what you said, they were like the Mexicans at the time. The immigrants. You know.
And I don't think unfortunately that's gonna change because
we're so close. Yeah,
one, yeah, and physically distance, yeah, we're so close to Mexico, which is the gateway to Latin America. But two, we just have to look at our skin, man. That's the first thing they see.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
you can
That's
always
true.
say I'm a proud Irish American, proud German American,
and
whatever.
you blend in.
But they're white. When you meet folks from Eastern Europe, they're newly immigrants or the third or fourth generation, and you could tell by the last name, with that ends in SKI, SKY. They're of the Eastern Europe. But why isn't that they're forced to say, oh well, you're of Polish descent. How come you don't speak Polish? You're of Russian descent. How come you don't speak Russian? You're of Yugoslavian descent. How come you don't speak, Slavic? But we as Latinos, we have to speak Spanish, and if we don't speak Spanish, not only are we probably looked down upon by our own communities, but we're also to a certain extent looked down upon from the larger society, because we're not fitting into their paradigm of what it is to be Latino or Mexican, or and Mexican for them is like everything, because they don't, most Americans, here in the United States, they don't know the difference between someone from Mexico, someone from El Salvador, or someone from Bolivia. We're just all Mexican, and they don't. And
We all speak Mexican.
yeah, yeah, no, it's true, man. Yeah, stop speaking Mexican, and that's pretty dumb. It's like, well, you stop speaking American. Stop speaking American.
Hey,
And I think that's like going back to what you were saying, though. Why is it that we as a Latino community, why did we fragment ourselves even more? And I think part of it is because we're not monolithic. I mean, we know the difference between someone from Mexico and someone from Central America, someone from South America. Yeah, we all have a similar histories and similar culture, and we all have a similar Spanish, but within different parts of Mexico, within different parts of Latin America, Spanish is different. You know, so even Spanish is not the same. Depending on what part of the
Yeah.
Western Hemisphere you're from,
I
or
know,
if you're
and
from Spain, it's totally different.
yeah.
Corazon.
Even in Spain, it's
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
No, and there's like some indigenous people that they don't even know Spanish. Like when you go to like Cancun, or you go to the marketplace, there's like the grandma like making some artifacts that she doesn't even know Spanish, and then they have like a little the grandson. And, when I went to it, I go, "¿Cuánto cuesta eso?" And then they speak their own native tongue, and then after that, it's just like and there's even fragmentation at that point over there in Mexico. Like sometimes when they look at ese pinche indio and stuff like that, like they call each other, like that's like a way to offend someone, pinche indio and stuff like that, so that's
yeah. It's just like that. It's like that internalized racism and the colonialism still embedded in
mhm.
us, because it's the same thing over here in the Bay Area. Like when I was living in San Francisco, you could immediately tell. Oh, these, most Latinos could immediately tell, if someone was indígena, because they're shorter stature, they're
Darker.
darker, and well, they don't speak Spanish, and um, and you see that here in the East Bay as well. I'm not sure how prevalent it is in LA.
No, yeah,
Um,
I hired right there from day labor from Home Depot.
mhm.
And one time, there was these two guys that I hired. Only one of them spoke Spanish. The other one, they were speaking. I don't know what dialect,
Yeah.
but they some indigenous dialect.
Mhm. Yeah, man. And I think that adds another layer, of complexity, at least for those folks. And I feel really bad for the indigenous folks moving over here, man, because they're like in nowhere land. I mean, one, they're not accepted, in their home country, and then they come over here and everyone expects them to speak Spanish. And then they realize, they don't speak Spanish. Well, what are they? They're Mexican. Like, well, yeah, Mexico, was and is an indigenous country, and not everyone speaks Spanish, and so yeah, that's like really complex right there.
Yeah, so it's almost like we like the diversity and we enjoy that we're different, and then we we get confused, right? Where it's just the whole thing about full of rage and confused. It's like if this person looks the part but yet doesn't speak the part, somehow that offends people, or people become offended by that, or they get bothered because of that. And my challenge will be and continues to be tolerance, right? Acceptance and tolerance, and embrace the diversity within our cultures, within all brown communities. And it's something I want to teach my kids, and even just the bigger society out there, where we, at some point, we have to advocate for more acceptance and tolerance and diversity, because that's who we are in the world, right? I would argue we're so diverse, and we come in different shades, and some of us, we group ourselves with common language in some cases, and we're distinct in other cases because we don't have a common language, or we're not part of the majority who have this common language. And and I just think that's interesting, because we do it to ourselves, and maybe in some cases that's okay. And some folks may choose to say, what, I don't want to speak Spanish. I could care less to speak Spanish. I may look brown, and I can appreciate my cultural roots, but I don't identify with those roots. I identify with, growing up in Bel Air, or growing up in, the country, or whatever it is, or in the East Bay. And yes, I do have a Spanish sounding last name, but that doesn't matter to me. I don't embrace that. And for me, it's like, that's cool. You have to respect that, I think, to some
Yeah,
degree.
you have to respect that. But you know what? I'll be honest. Like sometimes and I don't know why, but I mean, I've grown. I've evolved. But that used to bother me when somebody with a clear Latino last name, and then they're like, no, I'm American. I'm not a Mexican, or I'm not a Mexican American, or I'm American. And like, I don't know, like in my mind I was saying, like why are you denying your roots, and like you said, Raul, like there's some people that just flat out don't want to associate with their roots, and you have to respect that. I mean, it's like, I don't know why it would bother me, but
But I mean, it's normal, because in some cases it bothered me too. But now, as you said, I think you said, we're growing, and we've grown, and I want to teach that to my kids, because I want to try my best to make sure my kids understand their cultural heritage and background, and they're proud of that. But who knows, right? They may just go in a different trajectory, and what am I going to do? I can't hate. They're my own blood. I can't hate on them.
I can't stop loving them because they're not like you.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're not, even though they're made of me, right?
Yeah.
It's like, let it go, Raul. Let it go. Let go of the power. Let go of the tripping.
But I think
And
the key word you said, Raul, was when you say some people choose to, and for me is, that's cool, but why? Why did you choose, to not speak Spanish, or quote unquote deny your roots and everything? For me, I guess that's the deeper question. and it obviously comes down to racism, and how we're treated, but and also the Americanization process, and yeah, and it's a lot of things, like our experiences, we're once again, I go back to, we're first generation, second generation, so we have a very different worldview than some, and we're from the border town and from the inner city, so that's a very different experience, like you were talking about, Javi, about, or I'll talk about being from Bel Air or being out in the country, where it's a totally different experience, where maybe that wasn't part of your experience. You were just another kid that just happened to be darker, and with a Spanish surname, but the way you speak, the way you act is from wherever you grew up. Like for me, it's like I can go back to Texas and different parts of Texas, and they're totally different than me, because I grew, even though I was born in Texas, I was pretty much raised in LA, and that's a different experience. I mean, even though I can, like like Sid can, like Javi can attest, I can go back to my southern roots and start talking like this, and it's all good.
Yeah.
Because I could code switch, really really quickly. Um, but it's like, why do we choose, or why do people choose that, but at the same time, I agree, it's like I respect, and I think more because I understand where people might be coming from. And yeah, when I was younger too, man, I was like, why, man? Why?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
Mexican,
Yeah.
fool.
there was a term that, I mean, it's probably, yeah, I mean, not probably, it is offensive, that we used to say, like, oh, he's a coconut, or she's a coconut, or something like that, because we're like brown on the outside, white on the inside, and yeah, I mean, I remember just saying, like, I guess I learned it from my father. He's like, oh, look, that person tiene el nopal en la frente, and they're all like, oh no, I don't speak Spanish, and I don't know why it would bother me, but
But I think going back to what Ruben is talking about too, for me, it made me think about choice and why do people choose to identify one way or the other, speak Spanish or not speak Spanish. I think just that in itself, it's, if you think about choice, like, why do we choose Pepsi over Coke, right? Because we can, because that's what we want, right? Because we like Coke better than Pepsi, because I don't want to speak Spanish and I want to speak English, right? For example, and that's what I identify with. But the fact that people are afforded, they're actors, they're in, they have their own agency and their own power to decide for themselves that they want to not identify as Latino, Spanish speaking individuals. What I'm suggesting here is that is okay. That the more we're able to start to accept and tolerate, well, tolerate sounds negative, but accept, the quicker we're going to begin to understand a different perspective, even within our bigger community, and be able to embrace the differences that make us who we are as a group. Because if we go down the logic of he or she is different from me because they chose to ignore their Mexican or Latino roots, somehow makes them less of a person than I am, then that serves as even further fragmentation versus, you know what, he looks like me, but he chose not to embrace the Mexican roots. And that's okay. You have to meet people at the point in which where they're at, right? Because if you have somebody who's still brown and proud and they embrace some of it, we have to work with that, right? If the goal is to live in harmony, in peace, and try to have some sort of unity, then I would argue what I just argued. If if the goal is to not care and just let live, and it is what it is, then we got to keep doing what we're doing. We can keep hating on people who look like us but don't necessarily speak Spanish. And maybe I'm getting a little too political, but
I think part of it is we're trying to authenticate ourselves, but who are we trying to authenticate ourselves to?
In relation to what?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because if I'm fourth generation,
mm-hmm.
I want to be American here. I don't want to be Mexicano over here.
Yeah. And I think another part is also, without even knowing it, we're feeding into the cycle that's creating this. It's just like, just because your parents or certain people in your community when you're growing up acted this way doesn't mean you have to act this way. It doesn't mean that you have to be biased towards folks who have a better command of the Spanish language, or folks who choose or just don't even know their Spanish language, which also maybe in part is they don't know or understand the culture and the history of their Latino or indigenous heritage, because maybe their family members didn't know. Maybe their family members weren't taught, or maybe, because I know a lot of folks, older generations, where they were told not to speak Spanish within their family because they didn't want their kids to go through the racist stuff that the previous generation went through.
I've known people like that too.
And it could be a self-defense mechanism. It sounds sad, it's and crappy, but that's a reality right there as well. But like I said, like going back to what Raul was talking about, it's like, I think the base point is starting from a humanistic perspective, looking at it from a humanity perspective, and you're an individual, you're a human being, and that's what you are, and this is who you are. And culture, language, those are all different layers. And I embrace you for that. I don't tolerate you, because like you said, Raul, tolerate is like, I'm gonna tolerate you so you go to the corner. That's tolerate. But you know what? I embrace it and I lovingly accept it, because I'm growing as a human being. I'm growing as a human spirit, and I can understand to a certain extent because this has been my experience. Fill in the blank. This is what I went through. So I think I understand where you're coming from. Why you chose not to speak Spanish, or that you were just never taught Spanish, and it doesn't make you any less of a Latino or a Chicano, or however you self-define yourself. And it doesn't, at the same time, it doesn't make you more quote unquote American than me.
Or even the reverse. More of an authentic Mexicano, right? Or
an authentic
Latino.
American.
Yeah, exactly. Or on the reverse side too, it's like on one extreme, an authentic American; on the other extreme, an authentic fill in the blank Chicano, Latino, Mexican. So why, that's the part that I have a problem with sometimes in trying to not get caught up in conversations or disagreements with people. Like, it's cool, man. Maybe earlier,
just for the language, and
it's like, it's cool, dude. I'll have a beer with you, man. I don't care. At some point, you got to be like,
but would you have a cerveza?
A michelada.
And I think part of it is also exactly like you said, Raul. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm meeting you where you're at, and that's totally cool, man. And if our relationship grows and evolves, maybe I'll invite you to my world. Maybe I'll tell you about going to a powwow. Maybe I'll talk to you about a sweat. Going to sweat lodge, or going going back to the reservations or things like that, or going back to Mexico, or coming and speaking to some elders that are here in the U.S. and talk about their experiences, because I care about you enough that I want to introduce you to this. And it's totally up to you to decide what you want to do with it, but this is where I'm at. This is who I am, and this is why I am. And I think if we allow ourselves the possibilities of different experiences, that's the American experience right there.
Yeah. But also, Ruben, I would even argue to say that we have to be open.
Oh, yeah.
To also let them take us where they want to be taken.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely, man.
Let them
because that's how we grow. Yeah,
exactly, and that's exactly that's the powerful word right there. It's like that's how we grow, not only as individuals but as a society. We look at the what makes us human, what makes us people. We have shared cultures and whatnot.
Diversity.
In the brown community, yeah, diversity, but we're all different, right? We're all different. So. We're all fathers, right? Mm-hmm. Last time we checked, we're all fathers. So what do we do? How do we talk about these issues and language? And, what are we teaching our kids?
Well, one thing that I want to say is what do we tell our kids? And beyond telling us what they learned from watching us, like the way that I said that, what I learned from watching my father, that so when I grew up, I guess it was okay to hate on people that didn't speak Spanish. I mean, it's not okay, but that's the way. I mean, I would see my dad, and I don't know why it would irk him that somebody, that the pocho looks like straight brown, like a Mexican, and they didn't speak Spanish. ¿A poco no hablas español? Like he get mad. So like with my kids, with our kids, beyond telling them, we have to live it, I mean, and we have to be, like what we said,
model
accepting, embracing the diversity, and I mean, it's hard. When my kids were little, all of them, like my wife and I say, oh yeah, we're just going to talk to them in Spanish, but we're talking to them in Spanish, and then we talk to each other in English, and so even though we tell the kids, okay, like my oldest one, he was the first one, and he spoke pretty much Spanish up to like when he was about like 3-4 years old. And then I guess once he started like preschool and kindergarten, like now, like they hardly know Spanish. It's like and I feel, I don't know, I feel like, I mean, of course I'm responsible for that, but and it kind of does bother me a little bit that they don't know more Spanish, and I mean, it's nobody's fault but mine, and my actually, I'm going to blame it on my wife. It's her fault.
I think so. That's a good idea. She didn't do a good job. She didn't try hard enough.
That was at work, she was home with the kids,
So Ruben, what are we teaching our kids?
Our experiences. That's what we're teaching them. I'm in a very unique situation. I'm in a blended family. So my son, his mother is Mexicana. And he lived in Mexico for a while, and so he's definitely Mexicano, and he's also American, and he's also Chicano, and he's also his own little enigma, who he's choosing to be, and that's beautiful. It's scary and beautiful because he's experienced it. He's experienced being Mexicano, and understanding that he's not Mexicano, because when he was in Mexico, he realized he wasn't Mexican, even though the entire side of his mother's family are Mexicanos. He's not Mexicano because he was born here and he grew up here.
And they call him gringo.
Yeah, and he realized this is what Dad meant by saying "soy Chicano," because he realized that, and my daughter, she's she's multiple heritages. You know, her father is white. You know, and her mother, my wife, is Chicana, and fourth generation Chicana. So, you know, the daughter's fifth generation, and you know, she speaks Spanish.
Oh, that's nice.
You know, and because her mom made sure to bring her up in a Chicano environment, Chicano household, you know, and got her into ballet folklorico and everything, and her mother made a conscious decision that this is how I'm going to raise my daughter. I'm going to raise my daughter to be Chicana, you know, and you know, so she speaks better Spanish, fifth generation, than some people that are first and second generation, you know, and you know, that's beautiful as well. I mean, you know, it's just, you know, I can imagine it was a struggle for her, you know, and it probably still is, you know, on a different level, not just language, you know, but she's choosing to be who she is, you know, she's not, you know, she doesn't necessarily is all like 1000% rah Chicana and everything, but she understands, you know, but once again, it's because what we did as parents, you know, that's why they speak Spanish. That's why they understand Chicanismo, Indigenismo. And it's going to be up to them and their life trajectory to see where that goes in their life, whether they choose not to speak Spanish anymore, or maybe don't even have to speak Spanish, because who knows where they're going to end up, you know. But as parents, you know, we did what we felt was best for them, was, you know, to enroll them in dual language programs so they can learn Spanish and English, and not be like their father and actually learn the proper Spanish and English and know how to read and, you know, learn how to write it correctly and all that, you know, because we understood, like I said earlier, it opens up the world to you, you know, not just financially, but literally it opens up so many different opportunities in life, you know, and but it's up to them. We as parents, we created the base, and it's up to them as adults, or, you know, young adults, to choose what they want to do, you know, and it's their journey now.
And that's how I think we're ending this podcast, in terms of telling, or in terms of embracing the power, so to speak, that we have as parents to have a positive influence in how we raise our children, and what we choose to instill in them, right? And, you know, do we value Spanish language? Do we value certain aspects of our cultures enough to indoctrinate? I don't want to say doctrinate, but to mold these little people into the humans we would love to see them grow into, right? You know, for a while I was mixed early on about, well, you know, my wife was more like, let's make sure they speak Spanish. And I was like, well, I remember growing up, sad to say, you know, being a bully about kids getting picked on because they spoke Spanish. So I was like, not too hip with it. But now I'm on board, you know, because now my wife and I are choosing to expose them, like you said, Ruben, to these experiences and to language. And then as they get older, they're going to mature and they're going to figure out. I think our job as brown fathers is to figure out, how do we create, or how do we develop the best kids we can develop, and they could take on a multicultural view of the world, or Spanish can be part of that, you know, and that's okay. And I would tell the compas out there that that's a starting point there. It's like, discover the power you have to have a positive influence in your kids, whatever that may be. So with that, does speaking Spanish make you any more brown?
If you like what you heard, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast and give us a 5-star review. It really means a lot and would really help out this podcast.
We invite you to visit us at loscompaslounge.com to share your ideas and suggest topics for future episodes.
Until next time, compas, be proud and be brown.
That's right. Be safe.
Till next time.